Loopt al?
Dat loopt wel. Nou, dit kan ik uitknippen hoor.
Okay. Right, our policy brief is about greenhouse gas emission. We're going to talk about what the problem is, the measures of the EU and the measures of some member countries, EU member countries.
Climate change is a huge threat for the world's communities and ecosystems. Its impacts are already being felt all over the world and are also knocking on Europe's door, bringing extreme rainfall resulting in devastating floods, heat waves, forest fires and prolonged droughts. Further impacts are expected in the future, potentially causing high damage costs. The last decade was the warmest on record in Europe, and heat waves have increased in frequency and length. Sea levels are rising, and studies have measured widespread changes in plant and animal characteristics. One of the main causes of global warming is the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Human activities like burning fossil fuels have intensified the greenhouse effect, and the effect has now been enhanced to the point where too much heat is being kept in the Earth's atmosphere. To keep temperatures down, we have to cut greenhouse gas emissions decisively, and we have to take action now.
Well, are you worried about the future and is climate change one of your concerns? Well, you're not alone. A lot of people have worried about the future and the climate. Well, the EU new strategy on adaptation to climate change adopted by the European Commission in 2015 sets out a framework and mechanisms for taking the Europeans' preparedness for current and future climate impacts to a new level. Climate change is now one of the most important points on the political agenda of the European Commission. To avoid the most serious risk of climate change, the international community has agreed that global warming must be kept below 2.0 degrees compared to the pre-industrial temperature. To reach this new goal, the meeting of the European Council in 2015 and 2011 sets out the 2020 targets and the 2030 targets. Well, the 2020 targets are about 20% less CO2 emission compared to 1990, 20% less power consumption, and 20% of the total power consumption has to find its origin in green energy. Well, now the new 2030 targets are about a 40% cut in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 levels, at least 27% share of renewable energy consumption, and at least 27% energy savings compared with the business as usual scenario. With these new targets, the climate change will get below the 2.0 degrees.
So to achieve these targets, every member state has to formulate their own climate policy. A good example of a EU member state's climate policy is the climate policy of Denmark. According to German Watch, like seen on the table, German Watch's Climate Change Performance Index of the EU member states, the country with the highest score compared to other EU countries is Denmark. The Danes invested 40 years to tackle climate change. In those 40 years they have achieved these facts. 26% of all their energy is green energy. Denmark's CO2 level decreased with 17%, and the heat demand is decreased with 75% of what it was in 1977. These achievements took a lot of measures, and a couple of these measures are these. A high number of households connected to cogeneration plants. These plants are very low deception of energy. Denmark's stimulation of wind farms generated besides energy also a huge new economy market. This resulted in more innovations, jobs, and most importantly, more tolerance towards the transition to durable energy. Denmark's citizens are also shareholders of the green energy project. This made the people of Denmark less reluctant towards the new project. Companies and factories have to stick to strict regulations regarding greenhouse gas emission, and the Danish citizens has to pay considerably more environment fee than other EU citizens. So if every EU member state has to formulate a climate policy, they has to do it like Denmark to achieve their climate goals.